when I was attending a university. I used to work on campus at one of the dining halls during the dinner or night shift. I lived in the next town over since it was cheaper to live in a crappy little apartment out of town than to live on campus in the dorms. But I didn't own a car, so I had to take the bus. One night, I had just gotten off a shift at work and my feet were killing me and I was completely exhausted as I slowly made my way to the bus stop. I noticed a man, much older than me, sitting on one of the two benches at the otherwise empty bus stop, but I didn't pay too much attention to him. I simply sat down on the second bench and listened to some music while waiting for the bus to arrive. The first sign that things were starting to get weird was when I kept noticing out of the corner of my eye that he was staring at me. At first, I thought I might be imagining it, so I looked over and caught him quickly turning his head to look away. Okay, so he was staring at me. This was completely out of the ordinary, since being a young college girl seemed to gain me a bit of attention from older men. So, like usual, I just ignored him. That was a mistake. Again, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him look at me. But instead of just staring this time, he got up and walked over to sit next to me instead. I continued listening to my music, hoping that he'd see the earbuds and take the hint that I wasn't interested in having a conversation. Instead, this man literally took the earbud out of my ear.
"Hey there, sweetheart,"
he said as my head snapped to look at him in shock. I should have told him off for touching my things and demanded he leave me alone. But I was sort of frozen and didn't want to make him mad. Hi," I replied quietly. He started introducing himself as Mike and telling me that he lived in the area and it was always nice to see pretty girls like me at the university bus stop. He explained that he was a real man, unlike the boys I went to school with, and that I should go home with him that night. I was shy, scared, and a virgin who had never had a man be so bold as this to my face. I say to my face because I had certainly gotten my fair share of unsolicited private pictures online by that point, but I digress. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. But that didn't stop Mike from continuing to explain to me all of the fun things he wanted to do with me at his place that night. He got into graphic detail. The things he described started out with basic things you'd expect, and escalated him asking if I liked being choked until I turned purple and passed out in bed. I wished there was anyone else at that bus stop, but it was just the two of us, in the dark alone, as I counted the seconds until the bus would arrive. Then Mike took things to a different level of shocking by telling me,
"Listen, the demons want me to ask you for your phone number. They say that you should give it to me or you won't like what happens."
He actually had the audacity to start stroking my hair. His hand was gentle, but I didn't want him touching me at all. This was shocking for a number of reasons. The demons? I wouldn't like what would happen? Why was he touching me? What the hell was this guy talking about? As though he could read my mind, Mike went to explain.
"My therapist knows the demons are real. I told her about them. She says I'm not crazy, and the demons are real."
He laughed, then abruptly stopped.
"Now give me your phone number like they said,"
he demanded. And as his hand stroked my hair for the last time, he stopped and gripped the back of my neck, still gentle, but even more terrifying. I was scared and obviously didn't want him to have my phone number, But he was taking out his phone, and I knew that he was going to call the number I gave him to make sure that I wasn't lying to him. And he still had his hand on the back of my neck. So, I reluctantly gave him my real phone number. Stupid, I know, but I was right, and he immediately called to check. All I could think about was not making this guy angry long enough to get away from him. Then, I'd block his number. Thankfully, the bus came moments later. I sat down as close to the front of the bus, near the bus driver, as I possibly could, since the bus was basically empty, and Mike decided to sit directly across from me. At this point, I had tried listening to music again, hoping that being on the bus and him having my phone number would signal to him the end of our conversation. However, he decided to reach over and unzip my sweatshirt, revealing my work shirt and the name tag, which I had unfortunately forgotten to remove in my haste to leave work that night. I hadn't told him my name yet.
Abigail. What a beautiful name. Our daughter will be named Celeste.
I shouldn't have been shocked at this point, but I was. I had stopped listening to music again and zipped my sweatshirt back up, which made him laugh.
You won't need that soon anyway,
he said, and winked at me, implying how he'd planned to undress me even further that night. At one stop, Mike tried to convince me to get off the bus with him, and I told him no, that I was tired and I just wanted to go home. So he said okay and stayed on the bus. I knew that had been his stop, so the fact that he was staying on the bus worried me. I was sure this meant he was planning on coming home with me instead.
Baby,
Mike whispered to me. I tried to ignore him, but he repeated himself louder.
Baby.
He had the most unsettling smile on his face as I asked, What? He laughed and told me.
The demons say you smell nice.
I was terrified and felt like I was going to throw up by the time the bus stop arrived. I lived in an apartment alone and didn't want him to know where I lived. Despite my body being exhausted and sore from work, adrenaline kicked in, and I bolted off the bus and ran straight home. I made it inside and locked the door, and looked through the peephole and didn't see him, so I went to carefully peek out of my window. And I saw him standing near the bus stop, looking around. He took out his phone, and sure enough, I started getting a call from an unknown number since I hadn't saved his number. I ignored it. When he hung up, I started getting several texts asking where I had gone and how he didn't like hide and seek, and how the demons just wanted to have fun, but I was being a little bitch about it. I was so scared because he knew which apartment building I lived in and where I worked and where I went to school, my phone number, and my name. The only good thing which made me feel slightly relieved was that he didn't know which specific apartment number I lived in. That's when he started yelling outside. There were no specific words said, just wordless yells of what I can only assume were frustration and anger. I blocked his number and kept all the lights in my apartment off as I cried with my back to the front of the door. Maybe I should have called the police, but my brain was so frazzled that I didn't even think of that until the next day. And by then, all I knew about him was that he was a mentally unstable man, probably named Mike, who hadn't actually done any physical harm to me. So I didn't think it was worth it. In hindsight, I know that I made a lot of stupid mistakes during this experience, and I ended up moving away entirely at the end of the term of school for unrelated reasons. But until then, I switched to day shifts at work and was paranoid every night. Thankfully, I never saw the man again though, so Mike The scary guy from the bus stop who tried to follow me home. I never want to meet you or your demons ever again.
I'm a security guard, 22, male, and was working the graveyard shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I was posted at a library where my main task was to watch for trespassers, particularly an older male who kept coming back to the library overnight. The library had a bolo out for him and emailed me a photo of him, so I was on the lookout. Around 1 a.m., I got up from the security desk to go out on patrol. As I approached the door to go outside, I saw 2 homeless people sitting outside on a bench with a large shopping cart covered by a blue tarp. Not joking about this. The tarp had red stains all over it. Being generally creeped out already, I hesitated to even go outside at all. I thought about just using the on-site cell phone to call the police department, as that is what I was supposed to do. However, I decided it wouldn't be right to call without politely letting the couple know they were trespassing first, and give them an opportunity to leave without incident. And it would have been less work for me, as anytime I have to call PD, I have to make an incident report. So I grabbed my flashlight and walked outside, identifying myself as security and letting the people know that they needed to leave. They were a younger African American couple. Neither one matched the description of the bolo suspect. The man was pacing back and forth, smoking a cigar and writing something on a notepad. The woman was sitting down, sort of just staring into space. So, anyway, I asked them both to leave, and the woman begins arguing with me about how she's homeless and how the police already told her she could stay there. I knew that was obviously a lie, and I told her that she needed to leave once again. We got onto the subject of how they were loitering, and I kept trying to explain to her that she was loitering and that wasn't allowed at the library. She began to argue with me about the definition of loitering and just being a pain in the butt. This whole time, the man said absolutely nothing and was just in his own world, continuing to pace back and forth and chain smoke. I realized I wasn't going to get anywhere by being nice, so I informed them that I would be calling the police and retreated back inside the security room to call. 10 minutes went by after I called, and the couple appeared to be gone. A few moments later, the police arrived, and I went outside to talk to them. They really didn't seem to care much, as to be expected, right? And once they saw that they were gone, they just told me to call them back if they returned. So I go out on patrol, and as I'm making my way around the building, I run into the same woman who I just called the cops on. She was now by herself, and the man was nowhere in sight. She had a very odd stance and posture. It's difficult to describe, but if you've ever played any of the Silent Hill games, but her posture was similar to the way the nurses from Silent Hill stand. I didn't even say anything to her, and she didn't seem to notice me at all. I went back to where the police were still parked and told them that she was still on the premises. They got out of their cars and walked with me to where she was standing and asked her to leave. She started telling them she had permission to be there and that the sheriff told her she was allowed to be there. They told her she wasn't, and to make a long story short, she eventually left. Or so I thought. After the police finally left, I went back inside and made a cup of coffee. I decided I wanted a little fresh air, so I stood outside and drank my coffee. It was around 2 a.m. at this point. Now, this is where things get really creepy. Next to the library parking lot is a big park, the playground. I started to hear what sounded like faint whispers, followed by menacing laughter. I looked over in the direction of the noise and barely managed to spot the couple. The man had returned and was standing next to the woman from earlier. They were just staring at me. Because it was so dark, I could only see their silhouettes, and their eyes were literally glowing, kind of like when a person's eyes glow in a picture. The woman kept laughing while the man said in a slow, monotone voice, all the different ways he could hurt me. He said it loudly enough to understand what he was saying, and I knew he was talking about me. He was talking to her, but was talking about cutting my face off and skinning me. Then he shouts, "That uniform doesn't make you, though." And at that point, I just got too sketched out and went inside to finish my shift. The rest of the night was unsettling too, because I kept hearing voices outside and tapping on the walls and doors, and I knew it was them. Luckily, they couldn't get inside without a key card. When my shift ended, it was once again daylight outside. I went to my car, and there was a sticky note that read, "Next time, you won't be so lucky," with a crosshairs symbol next to the words. Needless to say, I am never returning to that library overnight.
I moved a lot growing up. By the time freshman year of high school came around, I had moved 7 or so times, and was about a year and a half into my most recent move. I had found a pretty close group of friends in middle school, and we all went to high school together. I met him through one of those close friends. They were in a band together, and even though he was almost 4 years older than us, we welcomed him into our group. Sam was easily twice my size, tall and heavyset, and originally kind of intimidating, although I was never afraid of large men before him. Well, lesson learned. I had a kind of bad home life, and I spent as much time as I could at school, sometimes hanging around the school campus until 6 or 7 at night with this friend group. 3 of us lived in the same direction, and we would walk the half-hour trip together until our paths split. One slightly colder evening, Sam offered to walk me home since the others had gone home already. I just thought he was being a gentleman. He mentioned something from a previous move when he lived in California. He said he didn't walk a friend home and something horrible happened. And he left it at that, and I let him walk me home. We got a lot closer after that. We bonded over both living in California and exchanged numbers. He would message me late into the night about his depression and self-harm, and I just wanted to help. A few months later, he tried asking me out. It was a big romantic gesture. He learned a Disney song on the ukulele and sang to me in the cafeteria. But I was already dating someone else, and when I turned him down, he got angry. A freaky, quiet, twitchy kind of angry, and I felt so bad. I started seeing him everywhere. Well, we were still friends. We still hang out in groups, but I would pass him on the street walking somewhere, and a few minutes later, I'd see that he'd changed directions and had started to follow me. He would walk me to classes by following me in passing period at a distance. I started to minimize the group time we spent together, and he would follow me more. I had friends meet me at each class and walk me to my next one because I felt unsafe. He knew where I lived. Then he started to talk, not to me, but to mutual friends about that one girl in California who he tried to walk home. At first, she just shared my name, some crazy coincidence. Then, she had the same brown curly hair and blue eyes. And every time he rambled about her, she became more and more like me. And then he said what happened. Over literal weeks, his fantasy evolved. They were walking home and they were jumped by some guy with a knife. It was a robbery gone wrong on her birthday, January 24th, which is my birthday. And she died horribly and he couldn't react in time. And she bled out in his arms. Sarah, who has brown curly hair, blue eyes, my name, my birthday, and sounds just like me, bled out in his arms. Each retelling added more and more detail, and this guy with his sick fantasy about my death would follow me around and knew where I lived. My boyfriend, who was abusive, mentally and physically, but I stayed as close to him as I could whenever I could. Because if the worst happened, I knew for sure he could throw a punch. I never felt safe at school or in our little town walking home from school in the dark. One day, at school, he had a breakdown, freaked out and ran out of school in a panic. I was sent after him, and I found him curled up on the floor. I got closer, because I knew about his anxiety and depression, and my safety aside, I just wanted to make sure he was okay. It was then that he told me this horrifying story that I had been hearing from mutual friends with added details. He said, "We had been walking home from a concert in California, and we passed a dark alley, and a homeless man came out with a rusty knife and asked for anything valuable. I fumbled for my phone, and I didn't have anything else on me, and he thought I was calling the cops. He stabbed me, once, twice, again and again, and Sam stood there, horrified. He said that he saw red and grabbed a broken glass bottle near his body and attacked the homeless man. He killed him with his own knife. He told me he killed someone. My stalker killed someone. It didn't matter how messed up he was anymore, and I didn't care if it was a fantasy or real. I didn't care how it would affect his mental health anymore. I wanted to go to the police. I was scared for my life, and my friends convinced me to go to the school counselor first. That morning, we went and told them everything, the stalking, the stories, how he admitted to murder, and that was the reason that they moved from California, and how I was afraid for my life and wanted to call the police. The counselor didn't take us seriously. She went to the principal, and the principal, not a mental health expert, called Sam in to talk about the accusations. The principal then informed me that he did not think that Sam had any kind of mental illness or that I was in any danger, and that was that. I lost faith in adults and gave up on going to the police. I stayed with my friend, walking me in between classes, hiding behind my abusive boyfriend, and looking behind me every step of my walk home that year. The counselors ended up gaslighting us to the point where all feels like a fever dream now, and I would think it's made up if it weren't for my journal entries recording the events in my growing panic and the similar stories from my friend group. To clarify some confusion, I don't think anyone actually died in California. I think he's just a pathological liar, and that he was so deep in a fantasy that he had convinced himself it was real. No, I wasn't physically hurt, but it was emotionally scarring, and the threat that he posed to me was 100% real. Hey Sam, let's not meet again.
So I recently discovered this page and I thought I would share my Let's Not Meet encounter. I'm not sure if it belongs here, so just let me know if it would fit somewhere better. So I lived in a pretty nice area with my husband and some family friends. We lived up there for a few years with nothing bad happening around us. It felt like a very safe neighborhood. Now for context, I'm a very short white female and I'm considered disabled even though I look fine, but I could never really be anyone else since my disability has limited my activities severely. Anyways, on to this story. This happened about a year before we moved. I had some stories pop up on Facebook of some traffickers that were targeting women and children at a local store that we lived right behind. I was freaked out, so I made it a point to not go to the store without my husband. I still got the news articles about people being followed and grabbed and kidnapped from this store, but I felt pretty safe as long as I didn't go anywhere without my husband. I was going to work one day. I worked about 15 minutes away from our house. It was a call center kind of out in the middle of nowhere. There were fields every which way. I worked the afternoon shift and was one of the last people to leave that night. I had to stop and get gas and was a little freaked out because I was scared to go anywhere without my husband, but I wasn't going to make it to work and back home, so I had no choice. I stopped at the station and was slightly relieved that it was super busy. I got out and started pumping my gas when this big van pulled up in the spot next to mine. I got out and started pumping his own gas, and he walked around the pump and got in between my car and me. He smiled and said, "Wow, your car is so clean. How do you get it so clean?" I was flabbergasted at the question. My car was a mess. It was dirty with bugs and stuff on it. "Why don't you show me how you got it so clean?" He reached out to touch me, but I jerked back. Another car pulled up behind me and a guy got out. I think he freaked the other guy out because he walked back to his van. I quickly finished pumping my gas and got into my car, locked the doors, and sped away. A few minutes later, I look out my window and the van is behind me, riding my bumper pretty much. I could see the guy smiling and laughing with some other guy. I was pretty freaked out, but figured he was just going to the freeway. We passed the freeway, but he kept following me. Now I was very freaked out. The only place on this road now is my work. I called my husband, but he didn't answer since he was at work. I was freaking out, so I just picked up speed and continued to work. I kept looking back and the van was still there, just a little farther back. I made it to work. It was a large building with lots of cars in the parking lot. I parked right in front of the doors in a handicapped spot and ran into the doors. I looked back through the locked doors and I saw the guy stop in front looking pissed. I ran up to my department and went right up to a friend who was ex-military. He carried multiple guns on him at all times. I cried as I told him what happened. I got to work and was still freaked out all day. We closed and I was walking down to my car. I peeked out the windows and saw the white van. I couldn't see anyone in there and I wasn't even sure it was the same van. I ran back to my department and told my friend what was going on. He pulled out his gun and walked me outside. The van had now moved to right behind my car. My friend walked me to his car. We got in and he drove me right up to my car. He then followed me all the way home and sat outside until I was inside the house. I could see the van following us, but once we passed the freeway, he turned onto it. The next afternoon, on my way to work, I passed the gas station and the van pulled out. Again, they followed me to work, but turned away once I got to the parking lot. This went on for about a week. They would follow me to work, leave, then be outside while I was leaving, and my friend would walk me out. My buddy told me they were probably trying to learn my schedule so they could figure out a time to jump me. He insisted that I take one of his guns just in case he wasn't there at work to walk me out. I didn't want it though, as I was afraid that if I had it, then I would get pulled over or something and get in trouble for having a gun not in my name and not having a permit for it. I was telling my husband that evening about how this van was still following me, and he suggested that I should call the cops and let them know. I honestly don't know why I didn't think of that. So the next morning when I was about to get ready for work, I called. I told them everything, then I left for work. Just like clockwork, the van pulled out of the gas station and started following us. We're on the long stretch of road that nothing was on when I spotted a car parked off to the side of the road. I passed, and then the van passed, and then the lights came on. The van was pulled over. I later found out that the men following me had several warrants for rape and attempted kidnapping. The back of the van had knives, ropes, gloves, masks, chloroform, and some other sketchy crap in it. The cops believed that was going to be their next target. When I got to work, my friend wasn't there. He was sick. I'm glad I called the cops that morning because I don't think I would have made it home if he wasn't there to walk me out. Anyways, that's my creepy story. I hope you guys like it. It's 100% true. We have since moved out and I live in a not as nice area, but so far I haven't noticed any creepy people around. But I always carry pepper spray whenever I go out.
Hi, thanks for watching the video. I really appreciate it. If you want to send me a story to read, feel free to do so. My email is in the description of the video. And if you want to follow me on my social media, just to get updates or maybe to talk, the links and info for my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts are also in the description. And finally, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And turn that bell on to be notified for upcoming surprises. And remember, your fear feeds me.